Let's go to the audience right down here.
Hi, my name is Linda Caro. It kind of surprises me that the emphasis is on CO2, which is about 1/3 of 1% of the total atmosphere, whereas global water vapor is the vast bulk of it all. Is it possible that we are not accounting properly for the giving off of heat, such as nuclear power plants, which are several thousand degrees centigrade, Fahrenheit, that we're cooling with water and air every day, every week, every month, every year?
Is there anyone you would particularly like to answer that question?
Whoever feels most qualified.
Richard Somerville is raising his hand.
The direct heating from sources like power plants is negligible compared to these other factors, solar radiation, the greenhouse effect. And the greenhouse effect is due to water vapor, primarily, carbon dioxide and other gases secondarily. We can't control water vapor. It's controlled by the atmosphere itself, largely by temperature. So when you add CO2, you humidify the atmosphere and the water adds to the warming. That's one reason why Richard Lindzen's talking about CO2 only giving you a degree or so is disingenuous, because that feedback is expected theoretically and has been observed.
I think Philip Stott is bursting out of his chair to agree with you.
I could not agree more. Yes, it's governed by the atmosphere, absolutely, and is not under our control.
But
it is therefore one of the big factors that we have no control
It's
in
true.
a non-linear coupled system.
You can control how much CO2 you put in the atmosphere, and that will have a big effect on how much water vapor is in the atmosphere. That's not controversial.
But you can't
It is
predict what...
controversial, and it's controversial because it is not a homogeneous distribution of water vapor. And, you know, to pretend this is settled is bizarre. Moreover, with clouds, which are comparably important, you know full well that is not settled.
Let us
Long shot.
go to another questioner from the audience, down on this side in the front.
Andy Revkin from the New York Times. I've been writing about this for a long time, almost every aspect of it. So my question is one about the hedging. Managing risk came up before, which is not what you think of when you think of crisis and catastrophe. My sense is that there's one thing that everyone has agreed on, at least except maybe Philip, which is that more greenhouse gases will make the world warmer. Is there anyone other than Philip who disagrees with that?
I don't disagree with
Okay, you did. So we all. I'd love to find the things we agree on. So everyone agrees more greenhouse gases will make the world warmer. The doubling is a step on the staircase we're heading on toward tripling or quadrupling. I think everyone would mostly agree that if we go to 9 billion people, all of whom would love to have our level of affluence, we're going in that direction. And so, as a hedging exercise, if it weren't costly to slow the pace beyond the Jesse Alsobel very slow decarbonization, if we could find a new way that didn't cost a lot, that actually could give energy for those developing countries that crave it, and limit emissions at the same time, would anyone on the pro side think that it's a bad idea to stop emitting greenhouse gases if there were a solution?
Michael Crichton, you're shaking your head no.
As a hedge.
I don't think anybody objects. The question is whether or not you're going to spend what Bjorn Lomborg thinks, which is $558 trillion. And I think if in fact it's going to prove to be that kind of enormous construction project, then that should not be the first priority right this minute. No, I don't.
So let me pursue Andy Revkin's stab at striking a consensus on what to do. For the anti-side, if this is a crisis, what kind of lifestyle change, what kind of economic pain, and how quickly are you proposing to hedge our bets? Brenda
ASAP. As soon as possible, because
But what?
everything that we can throw at solving this climate crisis, well, this climate problem, is important, because every day that we emit carbon dioxide means that it will last for many, many centuries. And so we have to start weaning ourselves off of ways of emitting more methane, more nitrous oxide, all the heat-trapping gases, not just carbon dioxide. It's the ones that have long life, nitrous oxide, carbon dioxide, that are very, very important. In the short term, methane is very important because it has such heat-trapping potential.
But
and
forgive
so
me, but the question from
everything.
the question from the audience was things that we could do. Correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew. Things that we can do without much pain that would stave this off.
Well,
Are there, you're talking about
Well, right-
revolution, anything necessary.
The real problem is
Philip
there's no
Stein.
social discounting in this. Let's get a bit of economics in. So in fact, if you have an increase now and you take inflation into account, what you're doing is an average world income at the moment of $7,500. Predicted by a distance ahead, that will rise to about $88,000. You knock off what, in fact, the Stern report in Britain estimated as, in fact, the cost of global warming, 13.27 or so percent. It comes down to something like $70-something thousand. But even taking inflation account, that is still a massive increase in wealth. So what you're actually asking in economic terms is what is strange, but a poorer generation to sacrifice a great deal for what will, in any case, even with global warming, if it occurs, be a wealthier generation.
The thing is that companies right now, when they reduce heat-trapping emissions, they find profits that keep giving back to them, because right now we're so wealthy in many nations of the world that we are wasting energy because we can afford to. And the reality is many companies are saving lots of money when they make small investments to reduce their emissions. DuPont did $50 million to invest. They're getting $2 billion on return on that investment, and it keeps on giving. So it's not an economic argument.
Anything else from the anti-side that you think might be consensus, good for us anyway kind of measures that they might agree to?
Right. Energy conservation.
Smith.
Everybody is going to agree that energy conservation is a good thing and it should be encouraged. Right.
Yes, three heads nodding on this side?
You're going to argue with energy conservation?
All right, two and a half. 2.5 heads, that's good enough. Go on, Richard Somerville.
You know, a lot of things could be done once you free up the creativity of technical people, of business people, by making this a priority nationally and internationally. The problem isn't that there's nothing that can be done. The problem is that the people who are asking for your vote haven't heard loudly enough that this is an important issue to the electorate. So it's way down on people's priorities. That's the reason for the lip service that Michael Crichton talked about. People are a lot like Mark Twain. They're all for progress but opposed to change.
Let's go back to the audience. Someone on this side?
Thank you. My name is Heather Higgins. I'm not a scientist, so pardon my ignorance when I hear the scientific establishment believes in something. I immediately think of flat Earth consensus, the fact that there's no geography that should be admitted as science, and that women are all hysterics and ought to be bled. That assurance that the scientific community believes something does not take me very far. My question is addressed particularly to Brenda as well as to anyone else. I was fascinated by your statement that the Earth is more fragile than human beings are. I am not a scientist, so maybe you can explain to me how we managed to get through the Ice Age and the Middle Ages, when Greenland was actually green and people were a foot taller and there was farming there, and nobody was digging up coal to warm the Earth. And I'm curious as to why you think that this is an optimal period of climate. Certainly for far less money we could move everybody out of Battery Park City. And I am curious if you believe that CO2 is actually the particular problem is actually the issue, the degree to which you are willing to become like France, where instead of having 20% of their power from nuclear, they have 86%.
When there was a natural ice age before, and when we were coming out of that ice age, there weren't millions of people, 80% of our population, living on the coast with their high-dollar homes, or maybe fragile homes, not such high-dollar homes. There are many people living in Bangladesh that are squeezed between sea level rise and the melting of the Himalayas and flooding from the land side. And so we are talking about the fragility of humans adapting to this rapid change, as well as when in the past, sea level rise, you could have, for example, wetlands marching up onto land and moving inland and adapting, and dunes moving inland. Right now, we have all our infrastructure in its place, and you can see Miami is stranded out there. Atlantic City is stranded out there. We spend many of millions of dollars dredging and keeping these unsustainable systems. They're not able to adapt naturally anymore because we're in the way. And we also are going to suffer if we don't make action.
Philip Stein, you get 20 seconds to
Yeah,
respond.
it was, I think, a brilliant question, that, because the Earth is as tough as an old boot. If there is any fragility, it's in us, and that's what we're concerned about. The Earth will survive whether we're here or not, whether there's global warming or